Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Mommin'. We thought it would be really helpful in our early episodes to introduce us a bit more. So today we're going to interview Megan and give you a little bit of background on her life, her experience as a mom, and just get to know her a little better. So without further ado, here's an interview with Megan. Megan, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your family, where you live, what you do?
I live in a suburb of Minneapolis in Minnesota. We've been back here for almost 3 years, which is surprising. We were in Washington, D.C. for, I think, about 7 years before that. And I live with my husband. We've been married for over 10 years, which is also surprising. And our 2 children, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
What brought you to Washington, D.C.?
We moved there for my husband to go to graduate school, and then we just kind of stayed. We kept getting jobs there, and we just kept loving it and living there for quite a while until about a year after we had our first son and decided to move to be closer to family.
And sadly, away from the family member that lived there. That was me.
That is true. We knew you'd come back.
Exactly. And when did you and Patrick decide that you wanted to have kids, and how many you wanted? Did you talk about all of that? Or, when did you get to the point of wanting to start trying to build your family?
We did not know for a very long time if we wanted kids. We thought we did when we were first engaged. We did premarital counseling, and she said, "How long until you both want kids?" And we said 5 years. And then anytime we talked about it after that, even 5 years later, we said 5 more years. So eventually, I didn't want kids actually for quite a while. And then eventually we just decided it felt right. Patrick had had a kidney transplant a year or so before, and we just decided that we didn't want to wait much longer, but we did want to wait until I finished graduate school and started my new career.
And what was that career?
I went back to school to be a pediatric nurse practitioner, and I definitely wanted a year of experience before I had the baby. And I had exactly 1 year of experience when I gave birth.
That worked out well.
Yes.
So being a pediatric nurse practitioner, I know that I personally call you or text you at any time. There's no filter. Sorry. But do people call you all the time? Do you have friends and family calling you with questions nonstop because you're a resource and easily accessible?
Sometimes. It kind of goes in waves. And for a while, I didn't have a ton of close friends who had kids. And now I have a lot more over time. More of my friends have had kids. And I've made more mom friends. And yes, there are times when people call me. It doesn't bother me at all. I do feel a lot more cautious if I give advice, and I definitely prefer that people check in with their pediatrician when they can. But for simple things, I don't mind. Or I might say, I'd do this, and then call your pediatrician. Since I'm not actually their provider and I don't know their full medical history, I don't like to give too much advice. And it's always harder to give advice to someone you care about that much when you're not in the same role, when you're not in the NP role.
That makes sense. So be honest, do I call you more than anyone else?
No.
Good. Okay.
Not at all.
Good. We always wonder, my husband and I are always like, I wonder if we should be getting billed for this. So along that line, it makes you more cautious for your friends and your family. But when your own kids get sick, do you get more worried or less worried?
Less worried. I don't get too worked up about it. That changed a lot. Pediatric primary care has shown me that most kids do very well with many illnesses, but when I worked in the pediatric ICU, and from some of the things that I saw more there, I'm a lot more nervous. I'm really a lot more nervous about car safety and swim safety than I think I would be. But for a fever, I try not to get worked up unless I'm seeing things that make me nervous, because kids get fevers all the time.
That actually makes a lot of sense and clears up a lot of things for me. Even the things that when I call you, you're like, that's fine. That's not a big deal. Not that you're dismissive of it at all, but you are very protective of the car seats.
Yes.
Yes. Recently helped me fix mine. So in addition to being a pediatric nurse practitioner, you are also a lactation consultant.
Yes. So I always wanted to be, but there wasn't as much need for me to be in my first nurse practitioner job. But it's a really common combination to have a pediatric nurse practitioner also be a lactation consultant, because in those first year or more, really, but especially those first couple of months, that's a huge part of what people need help with when they come into the pediatrician or to see a provider. And so I always wanted to do it, especially after breastfeeding my son, and didn't have the opportunity at my first job. And then when I started at my more recent job that I was at, all of those nurse practitioners are lactation consultants. So it was awesome. I had a lot of mentors and I learned so much, and really, really love supporting new families and helping people on that journey.
Oh, that's great. It's nice that they had so many other nurse practitioners do that, because I feel like when you go in to those appointments in those early days, especially if you've never breastfed, but even if you have and just are encountering a new problem, you want to ask the person who's there with you, without having to book a separate appointment. So that's so helpful.
Yes,
that's really nice.
Yes, that was a great setup.
Yeah. So what are some of the most common problems that you see arise with new moms in regards to breastfeeding? New moms or fifth-time moms, and they just are encountering a new problem.
It depends on the kind of the breastfeeding dyad, so the mom and the baby, a lot. I think the biggest thing with new moms is just confidence and just reassuring that they're doing it right and that the baby is gaining weight. Sometimes there are things where milk takes a little bit longer to come in, or supply is a little low for so many reasons, and that can cause a lot of difficulty at first with kind of the triple feedings, where you're having the baby at the breast and then making the mom pump and give a bottle or a finger feed, like with a syringe. And that is so hard. That's one of the bigger things. And then discomfort with latching, all of those, working out positioning and just figuring out what works for that mom and baby.
Sounds very familiar.
Yes.
Did you have any struggles breastfeeding your son?
Yes. At first, it was definitely painful, kind of working out that positioning. And we had a lactation consultant at the clinic I was at that time who helped me a lot. And then he had intolerances to dairy and soy, and actually quite a few other foods. And so that means he had like blood in his poop when I would eat those things, and he would scream, and it was really, really hard. And I had to learn what to eliminate, and there was so much trial and error. And if you made an error, then it meant a screaming baby that you couldn't console that well until it was just through his system. So it was really hard. And it took months for me to really figure out what to eliminate, and there's just not enough known about it. A lot of women do experience that, and it's really, really, really hard.
Yeah. Were you scared every time you were about to eat something? I mean, that's a little overwhelming to think, oh gosh, is this going to cause a screaming baby a few hours from now?
If we tried to eat food from a restaurant, I would be nervous about it.
Did you eat out less during that time then?
Yes.
Okay.
It was
That
miserable.
makes sense. Yeah. Especially when you have a new baby, all you want to do is order in because you don't have any energy to cook anything. So how long did you breastfeed him for then, since you had to alter your diet entirely?
We still breastfed for over a year. I started dropping feedings maybe around 15 months, and then I think we were fully weaned by 18 months. I can't even remember now.
So funny how everything just fades away.
Yes.
So you are now taking the leap into starting your own lactation business. What made you want to do that, or what led to you taking that big giant step?
Yes, so it's always something that's been in the back of my mind. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. It's something that I thought would be a fun thing to try, but I didn't know how I would ever possibly do that while working full time, or if that would even be an option for me. And so with COVID, my husband's very high risk, and I ended up resigning on good terms, but resigning nonetheless from my job. And I can't really work in person right now. So unfortunately, I won't be able to do home visits, but I absolutely love doing lactation and I love supporting new families. And so I thought it would be a great time to get everything set up and see where it takes me.
That's great. Yeah, it's like so many people right now are having to make really tough career decisions.
Yes, and I've definitely seen moms leaving the hospital, like friends leaving the hospital with their new babies, and they were kicked out really early, not kicked out. For their safety to prevent the spread of COVID, they were encouraged to be discharged early, but that also meant they didn't get much breastfeeding support in the hospital. And then, depending on their clinic setup, they might not have as much breastfeeding support. And so, I really do think there's a big need for doing some telehealth lactation visits right now. It's not as ideal, but it can be very effective, and it's safe, a lot safer than exposing that baby. Of course, babies still need to go to their checkups, but maybe it decreases another visit.
Oh, absolutely. And just having someone to talk to and who can maybe even say something as simple as, oh, it looks like just adjust this, it's might be more comfortable for the mom not to have to strap the baby into the car seat and go somewhere, even if it weren't COVID.
Yes, that's my hope with home visits
Yeah.
post-COVID.
Yeah. So how are you balancing starting your own business with being a stay-at-home mom right now?
Not that well. No, it's going fine mostly. I'm a lot more tired than I was, but it's because I was doing all these things with the setup that aren't familiar to me. And we are just trying to do shifts. My husband gets up in the morning and with our 3-year-old who gets up earlier and is with him until he starts work. And so I have some time to work on my website or figuring out medical records online, and then nap time and after bed.
Sounds familiar, like a lot of people are doing right now, but it's certainly exhausting. It's a lot.
Yes.
We're all just hanging in there. So switching gears a little bit, you grew your family with your second child through adoption. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to go that route and what led you on that journey and the steps along the way? But first, let's start with how you decided on adoption.
So that now seems like a distant memory too, but at the time was very difficult. Not deciding to adopt, but kind of the journey there. When I was pregnant with my first son, Asher, he had a screening test come back off his NT scan where they measure like the back of their neck was a little bit borderline. And so that, and my husband, Patrick, is Jewish, and they said that they would like us, if we weren't willing to do an amnio, which we just didn't want to based on that one test, they wanted us to do a couple of blood tests, including a genetic carrier test, which they said they would have recommended anyway since he was Jewish. And they told us that they've never had two people come back carrying the same thing. They warned us that we might carry something and that we might even find out something that impacts our health, and so that we would have to feel comfortable with that, but they hadn't seen themselves personally any two people carry the same thing. And so we did do that test and the chromosome test. And the chromosome test came back first. It was fine. And then they called me at 9 p.m. on like a Wednesday night, which I knew was not a good sign, to discuss our genetic carrier results. And I was at work, actually. And so Patrick and I both got on the phone with her because there was no way we were waiting until the next morning, even though we weren't together. And we found out that we are genetic carriers of Smith Lemli Opitz Syndrome. So it's a recessive gene, so we both have to carry it for our child to have it. There's a 25% chance of any pregnancy being affected. And I read a lot about the condition and spoke with some specialists who were so kind and spent time with me via email and on the phone to talk to me about the condition. But basically, it can range from mild autism to not surviving even throughout the whole pregnancy, or maybe not surviving long after birth because it can cause some abnormalities. It can cause a lot of different things, actually. So I didn't talk to those specialists while I was finding out the results of Asher. We did an amnio with him in the end, and he does not have it. We were very lucky. But when I was thinking about how to grow our family is when I spoke to them. And one of them said, I just really want you to understand how difficult it is to raise a child with disabilities. And I know that to a point, not as a parent by any means, but I had a little glimpse into that as a nurse. And so we debated for a very long time about how to grow our family. And we were thinking of doing IVF with PGD because we had some insurance coverage for it. It was either that or adopting. And I didn't know that much about adopting, and we just kind of jumped in, and we probably should have taken more time to decide what we wanted to do. But it felt like for some reason, it felt like we had to rush because it might take years to grow our family. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know why it felt like that, but it did. And we decided to move forward with IVF. But during that, both of us felt a little uneasy with it. And I am not against it in any way. I think it's a great way to grow your family. I think it's so helpful for some people. It just wasn't feeling like the path I wanted necessarily. And then some other tests came up that meant we would potentially have to do other procedures to move forward. And we took a step back and attended an adoption information session. I reached out to my friend who had adopted two beautiful girls and asked her for more information. And when we left that session, we said, okay, we're still going to go back to the IVF clinic one time, but we both felt like that was what we wanted. We're not religious really. It just felt like the right step. And I don't even know if we told each other that day, but at our next IVF appointment, we both hoped it wouldn't go super well. A little part of us did. Of course, part of us had to grieve that it would be more complicated for us to do IVF. But big part of us both felt that adoption was our right step. It just sounded so overwhelming because it can be very expensive. And that is what led us to adoption, and doing the classes prior to adopting just solidified it. It just felt right for our family. And adoption, I don't want to sugarcoat adoption. As adoptive parents, we are definitely the ones with the most privilege, and there is so much pain in adoption for adoptees and birth moms, and I definitely want to acknowledge that. So I'm not saying it's like the most beautiful thing you could ever do, but for us, I can't imagine our life without our daughter and without our birth families that are a part of our lives. And we are hopeful that we can do our part to keep like our triads, they call it the adoption triad. We can do our part to do the best we can for everyone within that.
Is the triad sort of you, your daughter, and then her birth parents?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. So you have an open adoption, right?
Yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about how you decided you wanted an open adoption? I know in TV, it's always sort of like you choose what kind of adoption you want, and the only knowledge I had prior to you adopting was sort of that insight. So how does that work once you start the process? Do you say you only want open or closed adoptions, or what is that process like?
So our agency, and just from learning on our own too, it have really helped us realize that open adoption is just the best choice for your child or future child, and often for the birth parents when possible. There are, of course, cases, especially sometimes where safety is a concern, where that can't be. But in most cases, it's just so much better for the child, which is what it should all be focused on, to have an open adoption. It helps a lot to have a genetic mirror, so someone who looks like them, someone whose traits probably come biologically from their birth family. If they can identify that in someone else, that can be very helpful in many cases. And I certainly don't want to speak for all adoptees, but that is something that research has shown. And so most agencies are actually really trying to kind of push for that open adoption. On the adoptive parent side, I don't even know if we were allowed to ask for a closed adoption. It wasn't something we wanted to ask for, but I don't even know if our agency would have supported that. And then really it comes down to the birth parents. Some birth parents still do request a closed adoption, and of course that's their choice. For us, we were hopeful that we would have a birth family that chose otherwise, but of course there's things Like grief on the birth parent side, of course, could impact that. But for us, we were very hopeful that we would have a relationship that until our child would be able to decide what he or she would want, that we could, as much as we could, foster that open adoption.
So how do you talk about adoption with both your daughter and your son? So prior to adopting, you had a 2-year-old son. And did you explain to him as you had started the process and were, waiting to hear from a birth parent? Did you explain to him what was going on?
Kind of. So he was only 2 and we didn't know how long a match would take. And so we didn't want to set expectations that we would be adding a baby to our family in a certain time. But we did have a couple of books and we would just say, we're trying to adopt a baby. And I'm sure he had no idea what we were talking about. But we just kind of talked about it a little bit with him just to plant the seed and to have him know that a baby could be joining our family at some point.
And when you got the call that your daughter's birth mother had chosen you, did he understand, like, we're going to the hospital to go meet my sister? Or what did you say to him? Or how did that all go down?
I can't even remember. It was such a blur. We were matched after she was born, and so we were rushing around and packing, and we last minute decided he was coming with us. And so I think that we said that, but I think we were also worried to set him up because we would fully have supported if the birth mom of our daughter would have changed her mind at that point. Nothing had been signed while we were driving there. That was still fully her baby at that point. And so I don't really remember what we said. I think we said we're going to go meet your sister, but I don't remember. Yeah. He was excited for a trip.
And how long did you know? When did you find out that there was a baby, and how long until you found out that she had chosen your family?
We got an email at, I think it was around lunchtime on a Sunday, saying, you get this little email that tells you, like, this person is having a baby or had a baby, like a little description, and do you want to present your profile? So birth moms, I don't know how this process is for them. It sounds really difficult to me, but they basically are given profile books from adoptive families, hopeful adoptive families, and that is part of the process of how they choose. And so we said, yes, we'd love to present. And then I think it was only a couple of hours later that they emailed us and said, she wants to talk to you. And we had presented a lot of times before, and every time you get a little excited, but we were trying not to get as excited anymore because we're going to present to a lot of families, and
that's hard.
Yes, and we didn't want someone to choose us unless we were the right fit for them, and we didn't want someone to choose to adopt unless it was for sure, or to place their baby unless it was for sure what they wanted. So we were trying not to get our hopes up, but we couldn't stop thinking about it. It was the first time we talked to someone, and we talked to her that afternoon, I think on nap time, so it must have just been early that afternoon. And then we didn't hear anything for 24 hours, which...
Oh, it's excruciating.
Yes, but it was so hard. But also, I kept reminding myself, like, you don't matter. I remember we were walking to the park, and it was the 3 of us, and we were trying to distract ourselves, and we're like, what, are we going to get a call? We definitely didn't want to start packing. We didn't want to get our hopes up. We didn't want to send weird pressure vibes that she would never have even known we were packing, but we didn't want to get our hopes up. And I kept reminding myself, like, this is easy. You didn't just give birth, and you aren't sitting there deciding, like, am I going to place my baby, and who am I going to place my baby with? So if I kept reminding myself of that, it was easier, because I can't even imagine how you choose things like that. And so it still was really hard. I couldn't even eat at lunch the next day at work. We just got up and went to work because we thought, we don't know.
Right. You can't just stop your life.
No.
And the world doesn't know. The world doesn't stop, even though you're like, why don't you know that I have this huge thing going on inside of my head and we're supposed to be living normally?
Yes. I can't even remember if I told my coworkers that morning. I think I told one of them. I had been very open with them. We all shared this little office. Every time I got a phone call about it, everyone heard, and I didn't mind sharing. But I don't know if anyone even knew that morning. I couldn't even think.
So you got the call at what time?
Oh, yes. So I got the call on Sunday, and then that Monday, they had asked me, they said she wanted to talk to us again. I was like, oh, I guess she has more questions for us. And so I was at work, and I have patience, so I can't just easily take a phone call necessarily. And Patrick was at work too, but we found a time. My work was so helpful and blocked some time for me. And we talked to her, and she said, I've chosen you. I want you to be my daughter's parents. And we started crying in the hallway at work. I called my coworker sobbing. I didn't even say my name. And I was like, I have to go home. And we asked her multiple times, like, are you sure? Like, is this what you want? And whatever you want is fine. And then she said, yeah. And so we packed up and drove really late at night, and then drove the rest of the way the next morning. So we didn't get there until that Tuesday. So we found out on a Sunday, but that's really quick to find out on a Sunday. And then we were at the hospital Tuesday afternoon.
That's incredibly quick, especially when you have to pack up everything. Because if I remember correctly, you were packing up and you had to live in the state that your daughter was born until it was legal for you to bring her back home with you. Is that right?
Yes. So there's the states have to clear you. So the state the baby's born in has to clear you, and then your state has to clear you, which of course makes sense and should exist.
Right.
But it was about probably a little less than a 2-week process. And so, yes, we didn't have any housing figured out, and they had told us she would still be in the hospital that day. But when we got there, they said that her birth mom could go home and she could go home.
Oh, so you went and you literally picked her up.
Basically, we met her birth mom, and she made final decisions and, signed, and then we left the hospital.
And when you say you left, because I remember this phone call, you left to go to the lobby because you had literally nowhere to stay, right?
Yes, so we met, so Patrick and our 2-year-old were in the car because it was flu season. Things have changed because now this doesn't even seem weird, but our 2-year-old wasn't allowed up. And so they were in the car because we had originally left our 2-year-old down in the lobby with a notary we had just met, because for us to go up to meet our new baby and birth mom, we had to leave our 2-year-old with a stranger. So first we did that. And then, yes, Patrick and him stayed in the car while I waited for discharge paperwork for our baby. And then, yes, we didn't have anything booked yet. We went in the car. We tried stopping at some hotels near the hospital. And then luckily you found us an Airbnb that wasn't cleaned yet. So they cleaned it for us. So we were all in our car at 10 p.m. No one had eaten dinner. Luckily, we had formula for our baby.
Right, and you have this newborn
Yes.
just sitting in the car.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So what was it like? I mean, you're in another state. You don't have a support system with you like you would usually. What was that like? I mean, what did you do?
It was kind of fun, mostly. It was stressful at points. There were some things that made it not always as fun. And it was hard. We were sleeping in a hotel room some of the times with a 2-year-old who was just wide awake, talking at all hours because there was only one room and a newborn. But it mostly, like, we'll never have that time. It was kind of awesome because it was just our little family, and a lot of the adoption agencies actually say at first it should just be your family bonding with the baby. And so we got to do that. We got to see birth parents a little bit. And so mostly it was a lot of fun. It was hard because my husband was still working part of the time. And so I was with little kids during the day with no one else there and trying to occupy a 2-year-old when I didn't know where anything was. But it was fun.
I mean, that's a wonderful way to look at it. I remember during that time, my husband and I were both like, "Oh my God, what is going on? Like, how are they handling this?" But every time we talked to you, you were so positive, and it sounded like you guys were having fun. And Asher was eating a lot of M&Ms. I remember.
Oh, he was.
I just remember the M&Ms like in every picture, and he was so happy about it.
Yes, and he thought a continental breakfast was like our normal life then, because we stayed in an Airbnb for 3 days and then we stayed at hotels and we always made sure it had a continental breakfast. And the first day that we were back at our house, he said, "Are we going to the restaurant?"
He got used to a very high standard of life.
Like, "Nope, buddy, that's over."
Oh, that's really funny. If only, though. I mean, I like where he's coming from.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship like with your daughter's birth parents now?
So we're still really open. They are wonderful. And without saying too much about their story and her story, you know, how we found out is our story, but we do like to protect her story. But we're really lucky. They are both really loving, kind people, and they really love her, which is all that matters. And they still keep in touch with us. And so we feel really, really lucky that that's our setup. It sometimes is hard having an open adoption. You overthink things. You don't want to hurt any feelings with anything you say. And I never want to harm our relationship in any way for our daughter's sake, especially, but for ours too. And it's really weird because you love a stranger so deeply, so quickly. You don't know anything about them, but they created this beautiful child that you love so much, and I like can see them in her. And they made this choice that will change our lives forever and has changed our lives forever. So what's easy about it is you love them no matter what. And so they become your family, which our birth mom has also said to us, which is really cool.
That's beautiful.
Yes. In our most recent email, she said, "I love you all to Pluto and back."
Oh, well. That's really awesome. It's funny because, like I said, I had no insight into adoption before this. And then, you know, after talking with you, even from the first moment that you were chosen to be your daughter's adoptive parents, I was like, wow, she loves them. And it was just so interesting to see how connected you felt to her so quickly, because I think from the outside, you know, even our parents and I were talking like, well, what is she going to say when she meets her? Like, what is this conversation like? And how does it evolve? And I remember you saying it was just so natural. You were just connected. And it's so hard to understand what that must be like from the outside.
Yeah, I was really nervous to meet her. I was more nervous for the phone calls, but Patrick actually did a really good job on those. I don't know, I got so nervous, but in terms of opening up right away, I don't know. We got there, we saw her, we hugged and we cried, and we have pictures. I just went through all these pictures to change them over and was looking at them all, and we hugged right away. She made this choice, and she was so grateful for us, which I was surprised by. And I don't know, it was an instant connection. I can't describe it. I don't know. I've never adopted before or since, so I don't know if that's how you would always feel, but I think you maybe would, because you both love this baby and child, and as they grow up, adults, so much that you, like, how could we not love each other?
Yeah, it makes such sense. It's just interesting that you never think about that side of it, or at least I never had. I shouldn't speak for anyone else. There's just so much that goes on into it that I feel like it's presented in such a way on television and the movies, and then seeing it, like I said, in real life, it is truly beautiful, and there is such trauma with it, but it's such an amazing experience that you get to have this relationship with her birth parents.
Yes, and that is the hard part of adoption, and my part in adoption is not the hard part. So clarifying that, but it is hard because I left the hospital mostly just wondering how she was doing and feeling sad for her and wondering if my daughter was feeling that loss, that separation. And I don't know, but there is evidence to show that yes, that's trauma no matter when that separation occurs. And it was different because guilt came with adopting in a way that having a biological child didn't. And again, not trying to have a sob story as an adoptive parent. I am 100% the most privileged person in this dynamic, but it was a weird adjustment because, and I guess I should be worried about her and worried about my daughter, and that I guess should play a role, but I didn't expect or know that that's how I would feel.
Right. Certainly probably a learning process. You can't know how you're going to feel in a situation until you're in it. Would you have any advice for someone who's just starting the adoption process? Or what book would you tell them?
I don't know where to start. A lot. So I wish I would have started following people in the adoption community a lot sooner. I basically joined or started using Instagram because I started following adoptive parents, and then that led me to following adult adoptees and birth moms, and I have learned so much. And I wish I would have done that earlier in the process, although I don't know how I would have even realized to do that earlier in the process. But I think it's so helpful to educate yourself about ethical adoptions, really researching agencies or adoption lawyers. There's a lot of different routes that people take to adopt. And I just really think we have a long way to go in making adoptions more ethical, in supporting birth moms a lot better and loving our birth moms a lot better, and making sure adoptees' rights and adoptees' voices are heard a lot louder. That is who we should be asking about how we should improve adoption, adult adoptees. So that's a big part, is just researching things. And then for yourself, just finding support. The adoption process was really hard. We weren't in it for as long as a lot of people can be. And I know we're lucky in a lot of ways for that. But the matching process was such a roller coaster. And again, I know it isn't about me, but when you're waiting for that match, it's really hard. And it makes you feel guilty. It's a good thing if there aren't many people placing their babies. It is so much better if we don't have families that are feeling like they have to place their baby for adoption, and we're providing better support so that isn't what's occurring. But it's still hard to be a waiting family. It just is. And so we had done, as part of our adoption process, we were asked to do marriage counseling. Yes, pre-adoptive counseling. And it was so helpful. And I think anyone going through the adoption process, it can be beneficial to have a therapist.
That's great advice, and really good to know for everyone, but especially for those who are considering adoption or just starting that process. So switching gears a little bit, you're a mom with 2 kids, you're in COVID, even if you're not though, you're starting your own business. What is your go-to for self-care? What do you do to take care of yourself and feel rejuvenated and refreshed? Or do you have time to do anything?
So what I used to do was to meet friends out for a drink or coffee or a walk or even a play date, dinner, whatever. Get out of the house and meet someone socially. That's not obviously as much of an option, too much in our particular case in COVID. We are pretty strict social distancing due to my husband and just for our own personal reasons. So what I'm doing right now, I've never taken baths before in my life, but I've taken baths, and I try to get exercise or a walk and time for myself.
Do the best you can. We're all doing things we never thought we would do, I think.
No.
The joy of the bath is at least that you can shut the door and I guess you can hope that no one comes in, your kids won't barge in.
Yeah, I usually lock it if they're still awake, so no one comes and bothers me.
Very smart. And what's a goal that you have on your plate right now for you and your family? Something as simple as, getting your kids to do a chore, or, is there a trip that you want to take once you're able to, Bora Bora, anything?
Right now, I think I'm just trying to be more positive during COVID. Not more positive. I feel like we've been positive off and on, but just finding our routine, especially as we go into colder months, that's going to work for us. And my biggest goal right now is getting my lactation business up and running and finding a rhythm that works well for our family right now. And I know it's not going to be perfect, but trying to find what works so that the kids still have playtime, that I'm attentive with them during, and then that I also am carving out time for the things I need to do.
Awesome. And do you have is there anything that you've done recently that's been super helpful? Is there something like a new toy that you bought, or educational something, and a tip, a trick, a product, anything that's been really helpful to you as a mom or as a parent?
Yes, actually two things now. So the wipe away books for my 3-year-old,
yes.
It's like the dry erase marker. He loves doing them, and it's actually him practicing tracing letters and numbers. And if I'm helping him, we actually go over the letters and numbers. And he loves them, and it keeps him super occupied during quiet time. And more recently, if your child is old enough for scissors, I just started letting him use scissors at our house. I don't know why I wasn't. We just didn't have any out. And he has been cutting with them for the last day and a half. Pretty much that's all he's wanted to do.
But your floor must look great.
It does.
Yeah. So maybe a broom too.
Yes.
Yeah. And do you have any recent cute or funny stories that would be fun to share for our listeners?
So our daughter, who is not genetically related to us because neither of us are athletic. It's the only reason I say that. But she is so strong. I didn't even know babies came this strong. She's only 1 year old. And the other day I was trying to have them play in their playroom while I sat outside of it and folded towels, because otherwise they ruin the towels. And she took like one step up, and she was halfway up the baby gate, just standing there. I took a picture. It's probably hard to picture, but she somehow is just standing halfway up the gate. So she is probably going to be an Olympic gymnast.
That girl is strong. From like 5 months, you hold her and she's like pure muscle. Like my son is only 3 months younger, and he feels like a rag doll compared to her, and he always has. Like, she is just strong. And
he's not a rag doll.
He's not.
Tori's just very strong.
He's not. It's just you hold him and then you hold her and you're like, oh my gosh, he's like pure muscle. Like those jumpers, those baby jumpers, what was it, like a month and a half ago? My son was using it as a jumper, and I put my niece in it to keep her contained for a minute. And oh my gosh, she was halfway flipped over it, like doing a handstand. And I didn't even know it was possible. I'm like, oh, we can't use this for her at all.
No, she's so strong, and she loves food so much. So if there's food at a distance or she has to climb for it, she will get it.
She is crazy strong. It's very impressive. Well, thank you for sharing a bit more with our listeners. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Mommin. You can find out more information about Megan's lactation business at parklactation.com. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram at momandpodcast, or visit our website at momandpodcast.com. Make sure to tune in every week for new episodes with a great lineup of guests. Thanks for listening.